Dan, you mentioned about learning from each other, communities learning from each other. What about the lean startup community? Is there something that the lean management community can learn from them, and is there something that they can learn from the lean management?
Well, I am enormously encouraged by the lean startup movement. I think for two reasons. One, it is framing a lot of the things we've been talking about in a different language that appeals to young people who are interested in software. And you know, we guys come out of the pre-software kind of era, but it's communicating in a different language, but also it's introducing some interesting takes on the idea of rapid experimentation, the idea of build, make, test, rapid testing cycles of validated learning, of split testing, of exploring at the frontier what actually resonates and helps people solve their problems, and then pivoting and you know, changing direction in the light of that. Those basic ideas can apply to any kind of business as we're thinking through not just improving the existing business, but thinking about the next generation product, next generation service delivery, doing things from scratch.
It's almost like jumping to a solution if you try to get the product perfect right from the start rather than rapid iteration.
You waste a tremendous amount of resources designing stuff that people don't actually want. And then you have to spend a lot more resources convincing them that they do want it, instead of you know, designing smart solutions and trying them out in rapid experiments very quickly and listening to customers. So the web just makes it possible for us all to have direct reactions from and build a dialogue with our users that we couldn't before. So I see communities, I see customers as being an integral part of our development process. And that's what the lean startup movement does for the IT and software world, but also has lessons for every other industry.
Does the lean management community have lessons for the lean startup community? Because once the product is successful, it's no longer a small company, and the silos
absolutely,
going up.
Absolutely. And I think you know, I think the Lean Startup book's a great book, and it's very, very clear, and it engages people, and it's very well done. But as I've got involved in a lean startup myself to simply learn what this is all about, and as I'm discovering, there's a lot more to it than simply the test cycle. So there's not only a lot more to it, there's a lot of things you need to think about precisely as you scale up. And the nature of these businesses is that the successful ones will scale up enormously quickly, much faster than in the past. And so very quickly it could be a complete higgledy-piggledy growth process that needs sorting out later on. Now, how can we avoid that? By starting thinking about how we're going to build the management system and the product development system and so on right from the get-go, and I think we can. So I think there's a great deal of potential learning from the software world to the hardware world, if you like, and the service world, and vice versa. At the moment, those two communities they're not communicating because they're talking a different language, and there's a lot of sniffiness too about, you know, newcomers coming in and trying to steal the game. I don't look at it that way at all. I just think this is something really positive that is injecting a new language and a new perspective into our debate.
Well, you should also think about it this way. The history of the lean movement has been doing organizational rework on massive ancient organizations.
Yep.
General Motors, of course, being the most wonderful example. And it turns out it takes a few decades to actually, and maybe we could go faster based on learning, but still, it is rather exhilarating to think we could have a new world where everything new is done right. And we still got all this old stuff that was done wrong, which will eventually die, but or we will improve. But it is fun to think about, well, why can't we build organizations from the get-go that are actually addressing real customer need, solving real customer problems, with the least of all the inputs that are required. So it is this more with less. And we've not been part of that conversation until just now. And we're now trying. Bless us, we've been a little slow. to get out of our looking backwards and doing rework world into let's look forwards and eliminate the need for rework world, which is what we would really like to do.
Yep.
I think to some degree it also goes back to the earlier discussion about when machine was produced. It actually was talking about a holistic business system. But what the world read was a manufacturing system. And so we have focused a lot ourselves on the manufacturing conversation. And if you look at the book, it was in 4 major parts, each roughly equal in length. And we haven't really talked a lot over the last 20 years about product. We have some. We've defined an approach to lean product and process development, which I think is a very robust process that works in many environments. But we didn't spend a lot of attention on that. So I think when something emerges, such as the Lean Startup movement, it's in response to a need. There was a vacuum there. Yeah. And I agree with Dan, it's a wonderful thing. I think it's great, and it shows that people needed that kind of language. They needed that energy because now there's a lot of energy around startups. Jim, I think years in the very beginning, you used to often say that every company is lean when it starts up. And so we didn't focus attention there because there wasn't as big a problem there as we saw it. But now, as the economy really is changing, and you have more people interested in being an entrepreneur and more startups, then this need for the language and some slightly different methodologies comes about. The basic thinking, as I see it, is very much the same. It's very complementary. And I think these communities coming together and learning from each other in the future is absolutely happening now, and it's going to happen more in the very near future, I'm quite certain.
Well, it's very interesting, even within the software world itself, to see how the Agile and the Scrum and the extreme process development, how all these different sub-tribes in the software world are now coming together and are all looking at Lean as the step beyond each of those individual approaches. And so there is a hunger for something that not only just allows people to isolate themselves and do nice work, but actually to integrate themselves into the rest of the business.
We've seen this with different business or process improvement methodologies. They're each fine as far as they go, but what Lean brings to the table is a holistic look at the business toward achieving purpose. And we've seen this time, over the last 20 years with different movements as they come and go, and eventually they meet their, a roadblock, a barrier. They can't really take an organization further. And so I think this is part of that same phenomenon. What Lean, the way we define it, the way we think of it, offers is a holistic approach to business.
Well, just one more thing that we really ought to say something about. Lean as an industry and the business model of Lean has been overwhelmingly directed at big, mature organizations because they can pay big money. Okay? And we also have been, John and I have been working with a startup, and it's come as a little bit of a shock to us to discover they have no money. And we've been trying to do things with them and say, well, gee, just send us a nice airplane ticket. And they say, well, how would you like to take the bus? And though it's an interesting issue that there is a bias amongst the lean improvers to find big clients who can afford to pay a lot of money for big programs, okay? And you often do, by the way, end up working and doing good work with the hopeless. Okay, I've been there. Of organizations that were simply not ready to change, but were happy to keep writing checks. And so there's a moral hazard here, that the bias toward bigness. Let's go with the big lumbering old guy who can still write a check rather than deal with the little new guy in a different way that wouldn't cost that much, that helps them keep on a path toward actually lean enterprise without winding up in the weeds. And I don't have the answer to that yet, but I think we have to think about that. That we want to be helpful, but it's not going to be the model that a large part of the lean industry has been built on.